What is going on, everybody? Glad to be back on the channel. I tend to pick my guest with the fine tooth comb because I like to bring the best people on here for you guys to watch and listen to. And for anybody who's followed the channel over the last 4 years, you know that Sterling Bennett is one of my favorite people to have on. He's very connected with the 49ers. He's a busy, busy man. I know he works for 95.7 The Game as well. So to get him on here is a privilege for myself. And for really, I want to hit his mind or pick his mind about the draft. We got like 5 players, or I asked him to pick 5 players that he thinks the Niners should target. So before we do that, I just want to ask you how you're doing.
I'm doing good. I'm trying to still get over that Super Bowl loss a couple months ago, but get married in 1 month's time. So
Nice.
gearing up to move out of the Bay Area, move to Southern California with my soon-to-be wife and start our
Awesome.
new life. But yeah, I'm doing really good. Aaron, how are you doing? Is the real question.
Still not over the loss either. We talked about this off stream. I was like, I'm going to ask you this as soon as the stream starts about the loss. It's been the hardest off season to get re-engaged with the team because I said to myself, so hard to get there and it's so hard to not be injured and it's so hard and all these things have to go completely right for you. And I'm very cautiously optimistic this year, but like I like draft stuff. I'm always interested in draft stuff. Free agency is exciting for about 4 days, and then that kind of runs its course. And then this is the first off season I think where I've actually wanted the off season to be there and just kind of take my mind off of football and just not talk about it for a while. But unfortunately, when you get that YouTube itch to come back, even if you only have 10 people watching you, it's there. So if it's torturous, it's like I don't want to talk about them, but at the same time, I want to talk about them. So that's why we're here. But we talked about I know there was a clip, and we'll probably get into it a little bit after we talk about the draft. But like, there's a clip of Dante Whitner kind of putting it on the refs and stuff, and I'm just like, bro, let it go. You lost. Stop trying to find reasons why the 49ers couldn't seal the deal. It's just it's annoying to me. But yeah, we got a little over 2 weeks until the draft starts. I have my mind where I think the Niners should go as far as positions, but I don't know much about the players. So if you want to get started, we can start with your 5 players. I would love to hear what they are and what position they are that you think the Niners should focus on in the draft and maybe go, put that card in for when the timer runs out.
Well, let's do it this way. If there's one position, the most important position you think San Francisco needs to improve upon, what would you think that is, Aaron?
Right tackle.
If right tackle is where you want to go, we can look at the offensive lineman. And if I keep looking down, I have my quote unquote my big board on my phone in front of me, so I apologize.
Well, that's all
But
right.
the San Francisco 49ers have themselves in kind of an awkward situation in regards to where the tackle position runs out at the end of the first round. Yet pick 31. There's 3 maybe blue chip tackle prospects in this draft. You have Troy Fatano from Washington, and many think might be a guard. I know Dan Brugler's The Beast came out today, which has like 300 prospects on it. He had Fatano as a guard, not a tackle, which does affect or could affect where San Francisco and their mindset might be. Jordan Morgan from Arizona, who I like a lot, listed as a guard in The Beast this morning. So there's some tweeners that the body type may lean towards playing inside, but let's talk about those first round prime, positional guys. You're at pick 31. If you want one of those blue chippers, you're probably going to have to move up. In my last mock draft, I said, okay, let's say San Francisco wants to acquire that final blue chipper in the first round at right tackle. Who would that be? In my mind, that is Georgia's Amarius Mims. He's 6'7", 340 pounds. He's just a massive 30-inch arms. Like, this guy has pythons. He has length. He has the build. Like, he is, for the questions you may have about Fatano and Jordan Morgan's arm length, you have this massive human being that, despite having very little tape on, and that is the big knock on him, there just isn't much tape. There isn't much experience. But when you watch the tape, you get blown away. You go, if this guy is on the field every single snap, every single game, every single practice, he's only going to get better. He's technically sound despite little playing time, has a great anchor and pass coverage, phenomenal hand usage. His biggest knock outside of the lack of playing time really is losing to the inside move because he's so big, his frame turns out and he can't get back in. But that's where 36-inch arms come back to help. You can get a body on someone, unlike players like Jordan Morgan and Troy Fatano, who have shorter arms. Some fans in my last mock draft said, and they've really pointed out, that you are looking at, if you're trading up for a player like Amarius Mims, little tape, not much experience, you're giving me Trey Lance flashbacks. And I get that. All I will say is, let's say San Francisco has their mindset on, let's get that next star right tackle for the immediate future. Put McKivitz on the inside if he needs to play in Feliciano, whether he's depth or a starter. It just deepens your offensive line group. Then in the 2 years' time when Trent's gone, Marius Mims goes to left tackle. He's played 2 years, or maybe it's just 1 year. He has the frame, the build, the archetype, the technique that if he gets coaching for a year or two in the NFL, I'm not going to say he is Trent. That's super unfair, but you are going to have yourself potentially the next cornerstone left tackle to block for Brock Purdy for 10 more years as they get paired together in the NFL. All that to say, that's only if San Francisco wants to move up. And I don't know if they do. The last time they picked at 31, they traded up for Brandon Ayuk. There's a lot of talk of using that 4th round pick, pairing it with the 31st overall pick, and moving up a handful of spots to get a right tackle. But let's assume they're not going to trade up. Let's say they're at pick 31. They're stuck right there. All the blue chippers are gone. You need a right tackle. I think the simple, easiest, safest pick of the bunch that would improve whether it's tackle or guard instantly is Jordan Morgan. Where Mims has little tape, little experience, Jordan Morgan has played almost 2,500 snaps in college at Arizona.
That's insane.
There's no tape. There isn't a question of, well, he hasn't played much. No, 2,500 snaps. He's 6'5", 311 pounds, 32 and 7/8 inch arms. So even the questions of arm length, he's 1/8 of an inch off the average tackle arm length. I don't think it's that big of a deal when it comes to his arm length, but he's consistent in pass protection and run block. I mean, you look at everyone talking about the draft, they will say a zone run offense like Kyle Shanahan's is going to have a lot of fun with a player like Jordan Morgan. And the good thing is, let's say he's at tackle for a couple games, doesn't get it done. You put him at right guard, McKivitz goes back out there, and Feliciano becomes your left guard, center, and right guard backup. Is it ideal? No. But San Francisco values that 5th-year option so much. I can see them picking Jordan Morgan, trying him at right tackle. If that doesn't work, you put him at right guard, left guard, and you just have another phenomenal run-blocking guard in the fray.
What would be a realistic jump into the first round with the trade? Are we talking pick 24, pick 25? I always think if you're going to go after somebody, you'd have to at least get into the bottom half of the first round, maybe like pick 17th or 24. I would assume they would need a little bit more ammunition to go up and get a guy that's that far back. I don't want them reaching though. I feel like it, like you said, if you really need a guy or want a guy, you got to go up and get him, but he better be a player of the caliber of eventually, not going to be a Trent Williams, but somebody who's comparable to become your left tackle. Not just going and reaching for the sake, we need a tackle, we need to draft a tackle. Right. And it's like, yeah, but is he really the best option? Is McKivitz still the best option when we line up in July? Right. I feel like if a guy needs a seasoning who doesn't have a lot of tape, you essentially have McKivitz going in as the starter in camp and having the young guy, if he can, beat him. And if he beats him, he beats him. If he doesn't, maybe he sits a year or eventually becomes the starter down the road, kind of a little bit like a Jair Brown situation. Somebody gets injured, he's able to step in, play relatively well. So yeah, I would be interesting. It's not sexy. Offensive line picks aren't sexy. When you think of the draft, you think of corners, receivers, quarterbacks, all these fancy positions with everybody with great statistics and everything is they got all these beautiful highlights. Offensive line is the most boring thing, but it's so it's we've seen twice against the Chiefs in 2 Super Bowls how important offensive line is because Chris Jones has essentially wrecked 2 championships for us because we couldn't block him. So it's unsexy and boring as possibly getting a tackle at 31. It's kind of where I want them to go. But at the same time, I feel like with the Niners, if the guy isn't head and shoulders better than the player that they have currently at the position, you know, you know how the Niners are, best player available, go where they think they could add more depth, maybe pass rush, but hopefully it is offensive tackle. Silverado Kev in the chat, he says, as much as I love to address O-line needs, I just got a gut feeling we maintain our trend and take a D-line at 31. I totally feel the same way, which is unfortunate, but although I wouldn't mind the best cornerback available at 31 either. So there's that. But we might be able to circle back around to that, but I'll let you continue your quote unquote Sterling Bennett's big board for the 49ers.
Well, you mentioned what would be the ideal spot to trade up. Like the guy I like may not be who San Francisco covets, but let's say there is a player that San Francisco does covet. You're at 31. Where do you need to be to jump ahead of other teams that maybe want to tackle? You have the Bengals, you have the Rams, all sitting at what, 18, then 19 and 20. Like there's going to be a run on offensive linemen somewhere in this draft late in either the teens or the early 20s. Again, in my last mock draft, I made a mock trade to 17 with Jacksonville. Okay. It was to get to number 17 ahead of those teams to say, hey, whether it is Amarius Mims or Troy Fatano or insert some offensive lineman they like a lot, whether it's Graham Barton, whoever it might be from Duke, I traded pick 31, pick 94, so our first and third round pick this year, gave them a second round pick next year and a third round pick next year as well, knowing that in 1 year's time, we'll get that third round pick back because we have a comp pick. So you're not losing a third round pick. It's basically a pick swap, a third and a second for potentially a starting offensive tackle for the next decade.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the best move you can do. Now, again, will Jacksonville accept that? It's a mock draft, mock trade. Who knows? They can say, get the F out of here. And you're like, okay, like, sorry. But I do think if you want to get that guy, you have to get ahead of teams like the Bengals, Philadelphia. You got to get ahead of teams like the Rams because those guys have their eyes towards tackles. And if you are there and you can get to 17, Amarius Mims is mocked at 19 as the 19 top prospect on Dan Brugler's board. If you can get to 17, I think that's a great spot for him. And look, I know there's Brandon Ayuk trade conversations, or at least rumors swirling every single day. Half of them are not true. He was tied to the Jaguars. Now, those reports John Lynch said were false, but if those conversations of Ayuk, at least there's a tie there with Jacksonville, you got to give him Ayuk. Just give him a first-round pick swap, a second, a third, and say, hey, we want 17. That conversation, those phone lines already seem to be open somewhere. I would make a call if Mims, Fatano, or someone on the board that you like is still there.
Yeah, I feel like in order to get a guy of some potential or some worth, you probably have to, like you said, trade up to the 17th through 20th kind of pick. As I feel like the closer you get to the back end of the first round, I feel like you're just drafting for the sake of position. And I don't think that's the best way to do it. I don't think the Niners do it that way. Like I said, it's not sexy, but it sounds like every year we do this. We do this every year. We talk about how much we need offensive line help. And then the Niners go and convince us that they needed another defensive lineman. And we fall for it. And then every year, for some reason, something happens during the season where we say to ourselves and fans say to ourselves, we all do this. Just go on Twitter during the season. Man, the Niners really need to adjust offensive line. It's constant. It's always tweeted. So maybe this is the year that Niners don't seem to prioritize offensive line like they do defensive line,
right?
Which is crazy with the amount of quarterback injuries they've had over the last handful of years. So is the new guys in the building now that Adam Peters gone? Was it Was it a matter of things being prioritized? Do we have different priorities now that certain people are gone, or it'll be interesting to see. They really do need to do some due diligence on their offensive line and come
I
away
think
with a good player.
I think maybe it's a conspiracy in my own head, but Shanahan, for better or worse, they've drafted two Notre Dame offensive linemen in the first 2 rounds. It was Mike McGlinchey, now he's in Denver, and Aaron Banks. Now, there is another Notre Dame offensive lineman supposed to go in the second and third round of this draft named Blake Fisher. He's 6'5, 315 pounds, 34 and a quarter inch arms. Isn't the most athletic kind of tackle, but doesn't have many weaknesses. Very refined in pass protection. Good run blocker, has a good get off, good pad level. He's a player that I don't think would be the next left tackle of the future, but I do think he could be an instant upgrade over McKivitz, where a player like Amarius Mims may take a year or two, if he doesn't find his footing early. So the Notre Dame ties might still be there for Kyle when it comes to the offensive lineman. Now, to your earlier point about Mims, what you don't want to get into is first round pick. You got, quote unquote, the guy you really wanted, and you get into camp and you can't beat out McKivitz. That happened to Aaron Banks a couple years ago. He was at left tackle. They liked Laken Tomlinson there for a good reason. He was still a solid player at that point, but he could not transition to right guard. And it was like, oh, okay, like we have no use for you now. Then you get into the Mike Pearson conversation, Daniel Brunskill conversations of be my right guard, which I do wonder if maybe that's what San Francisco is going to target, because it wasn't Colton McKivitz that gave up that last sack in the red zone. It was Burford. Now, if that was Feliciano, who was, I think, pretty good, when he played, maybe it doesn't happen.
Right.
But I would also like to think San Francisco at this point, 2 years into the Burford experience, wants to make sure he does not see the field in the freaking Super Bowl. So if you can make sure he's not on the field, maybe it is getting a right guard. Maybe it is a Graham Barton from Duke, who's all around, I think, the best interior offensive lineman in this draft. I don't think they go center.
Any relation to Harris Barton?
I don't think so, but it'd be a great story if it was, right? It'd be a great story. But I could see them being like, well, right tackle wasn't really an Achilles heel last year. It was right guard, but also how much do they value Feliciano? He said this could be his last ride. Is that his last ride in San Francisco? Is that his last ride forever? He's 33 years old or going into his 33-year-old season. That isn't young, but it isn't super old for an offensive lineman. This is a year where, unlike previous years, where 2021, they're going to get a quarterback they traded up. 2020, got to replace Buckner. Like, there was obvious, that's where they have to go. This year is, we think it should be offensive line because that was the biggest, downfall of this team, but they could go corner. They love Marshawn Nealand, the edge rusher. I think let's see if I can find him here on my notes. Western Michigan, first, second round guy. Like, they love him. Has a top 30 visit lined up. I could see them saying, hey, let's save our second round pick for Blake Fisher, get the tackle from Notre Dame, and let's go get our edge rusher from Western Michigan in that first round at pick 31. Like, all of it's up in the air in the first round this year, where in previous years it wasn't. It was a very clear cut. You have to get this position. This year's not the same thing.
I feel like the Niners are really loaded for the most part, roster-wise. They don't have any glaring holes, but they're coming up on age with some players. One player that I've kind of fallen out of love with is George Kittle.
Oh, man, why?
He's just, I don't know, man. I feel like he's become more of a brand than a player, and he's getting into that part of his career. I don't know if some people just accept the fact that they're never going to win a Super Bowl, or I don't know, man. Just he's hurt a lot. He's older, and I feel like the Niners need to start planning for the future with certain players on their team as they transition away from them and start drafting to the future. And you don't want to reach, but I was really kind of, I look at the draft and I'm like, is there a tight end in the draft that the 49ers can really target? to eventually replace him. I'm not talking about a blocking tight end. I'm sick
Right.
of them. I want a pass catcher. Okay. I
You don't
want a
want your
guy that
Charlie
can.
Warners or your Braden Willises. You want
Yeah,
the next guy.
we're done with that. Okay. I mean, I understand that, and that's why offensive line is so key. We talk about this all the time about, the Niners need to prioritize offensive line so their tight ends don't have to block all the time. And it does make sense because they keep saying that George Kittle wasn't active in the Super Bowl because he had to block, and I'm like, whatever. But as you look at the draft, there is some needs at offensive line and maybe safety because you're a little bit with question with some players like with Ufunga, T. Gip. Everybody thinks he's retiring. Could T. Gip come back for one more season? And then of course we have Jair Brown. So there isn't a ton of holes, but when I look at the draft this year, I'm like, I want to see the Niners start to kind of approach the future. They have a lot of picks. I would assume they're not going to use all of them, but what do we do? I mean, like, people are getting older on this team, and they have to start to do that transition. I mean, I know we drafted 2 linebackers last year, and Graham, or I think Graham was Graham was drafted too.
Mm-hmm.
It was Graham and Winter.
Yep.
Do they get worked into the starting lineup eventually? Because someday Fred Warner has to be moved off of. I'm not saying right now, but I'm just saying, like, for me, this draft is a draft of, do the Niners start to look to the future for certain positions? I don't know. That's just my personal thought.
I don't think you're alone in that thought either. I think a lot of people look at this roster and say this could be even last year. But I think this year, knowing whose contracts, like Eric Armstead, could be up or could be expendable for this front office, I think a lot of people would agree that this could be the last year of this core mainly
Right.
together. And when you look at that, okay, you have to pay Brock Purdy, you got to pay Brandon Ayuk. Nick Bosa's contract really kicks in a couple years. Like, you have to, Mooney Ward's going to be a free agent in 1 year time. Like, Lenore could be gone in a year. Like, there's a lot of guys that have been mainstays the past 2 runs in the playoffs that may not be here, which is a painful conversation to have for certain players. But when you had 10 draft picks, sometimes all it takes is hitting on 2 of the 10 to really send you over the top. Now, you want to hit on all 10. Everyone does. It isn't the case. Like, hitting on Brock Purdy was a miracle from God himself, if you're religious. Like, it really was. But, like, let's take tight end, for example. You have Kittle. I, for one, still love George Kittle for what he is and who he is, but I would agree. I'm tired of seeing him in the backfield on the biggest passing play of the game. I'm tired of him not being involved, having 1 catch for like 3 yards. It was a 4th down catch, move that drive along, but I want to see Kittle have 3 catches for 35 yards, for 4 for 60 in the Super Bowl. Like, allow him to be a viable option for still a young quarterback in the biggest game of his career. He wasn't. Deebo Samuel, often injured. Do you want to get a receiver? But let's focus on tight end for a second.
Okay.
I do think there is mainly 1 player, but I do think there is 2 tight ends. But I'll pick my favorite of the 2.
Okay.
Ben Sinnott from Kansas State. Probably third, 4th round pick. I think you could get him at 94 this year. He isn't the biggest guy. He's 6'3", 245 pounds, but he plays big. He plays like a monster. And it's just like, yes, like that guy, the tenacity he plays with, the aggression he plays with feels like a 49er. I know he's in Kansas. He feels like an Iowa tight end the way he wants to be aggressive. He's a really good run blocker, but also a really good receiver. 48 catches on 73 targets this year. He can play at the line of scrimmage. He can play in the backfield, in the slot, lined out wide. And again, not the biggest guy, but I do think with the route running capabilities that he has, if he's the number 2 behind George Kittle for 1-2 years, you're not asking for an instant impact player. What you're asking for is, can you do more than Charlie Warner and Ross Dwelly and Braden Willis and the god-awful pick that was Cam Latu last year? Like, you just need to be like a Jonnu Smith, which he had a great year last year for the Falcons, but can you be just a good number 2 tight end where if Kittle's covered, you can get open? And I think Ben Sinnott this year could be that. He's not going to be, he's going to be a red zone guy in a couple years. No, he can be a receiver this year. Again, he's smaller, but you can put him everywhere. Which Ross Dwelley was kind of like that for a year in
He
2019,
looks
but
like he's big
after
enough to
that,
where he could play the slot. You put him
yeah,
in the slot.
like slot, out wide, line of
6'3" is
scrimmage.
big for a receiver. It's funny. I'm about 6'3", and it's small for football. If you
Right,
think about
right.
it, who would have thought, right?
But
Like a 6'3" quarterback's kind of small, a 6'3" tight end's kind of small. So
when
it's
like
just funny.
you can dive into it a little further, look at the way Shanahan uses Kyle Juszczyk. Now I'm not saying
Hmm.
Sanat's Kyle Juszczyk, but or going to be used that way, but Juszczyk plays at the line, in the slot, line of scrimmage, like in the backfield, even out wide sometimes. Like you could find and give Kyle Shanahan, even though he shouldn't need more weapons, you can give him more weapons to work
True.
with in an offense already loaded. And then when Kittle's 33, 34, 35 in 2, 3 years' time, say, okay, you're older. Do you want to still be here, take a cheaper contract, or walk into the sunset and go to Iowa or Nashville where you live and watch hockey games out there with your wife, which is great
Right.
for you? We'll have Benson not behind you for a year or two. He'll grow, he'll learn. And as a third round pick, like that's a steal. Like the tight end grouping this year is not very good. It's Brock Bowers, not much. I think Ben Sinnott fits right behind 1 and 2 spots behind Brock Bowers, which Bowers is his own animal. No one's saying Sinnott is that. But you hear guys like Theo Johnson get tossed around, Jaheim Bell. Like, there's either little tape on Johnson, inconsistencies. Jaheim Bell doesn't have the size. He's 6'2", 240. He's super
Wow.
small.
That's really
Um,
small.
like can't play the inline, special team guy. But I think if you want that mid-round, third, fourth round tight end, or San Francisco, like you said, doesn't want to use all 10 picks, wants to trade up for a guy, I can see them coveting a Benson not from Kansas State to eventually replace George Kittle in a handful of years.
Is Bowers a top 10 pick?
I think the Jets make a lot of sense at 10. I think he's right
Yeah.
on that cusp of 10. The Jets could go tackle, which I think if you're the Niners, you're praying they don't, because if you don't go, one more slides down for you. But I think you give Aaron Rodgers, Brock Bowers, and in a couple years, and they have a new quarterback, he will have one of the best situations to walk into weaponry wise. But I think the Jets want to go for it this year, and they need a tackle and they need offensive line. But you give Aaron Rodgers, Brock Bowers, good night.
You get anybody, dude. That's what I was asking. Like, what would the Niners need to do to to trade up into the top 10? It's not going to happen, people.
Everything. Give
Everything.
us
They would
George
have
Kittle.
to. You'd have to trade Kittle, maybe Ayuk. It's. I don't know. I'm one of those people. I live by the Bill Walsh mindset of getting rid of players earlier than too late
Right, right,
when they have value. I'm not saying you just trade Kittle for a bag of potato chips.
right,
Like you get something for him, but the Niners don't even really prioritize using him. Like their priorities right now are McCaffrey, and McCaffrey. That's what they do. That they live and die by Christian McCaffrey. And that's the
yeah,
one thing about Kyle that drives me insane is he becomes so reliant on certain players. And then when those players get hurt, we had a whole game plan set up for so and so. It's like,
right,
yeah, but guys get hurt. So like there's never seemed like to be any alternate plans of attack if a certain player goes down. Debo to me is frustrating because you know what he can do, you know how aggressive and dynamic he can be, but he's also another guy that gets hurt a lot. The one
right.
thing about Ayuk is Ayuk stays healthy.
Hmm.
He's on the field all the time. And to me, health is wealth. You can be as awesome as could be as a player, but if you can't stay on the field, what's your value to the team?
Right.
I saw the bet that's going on between Debo and Kittle about what having to wear for week one, the week one outfit. And I'm like,
Yeah.
Kittle needs to make it to week one, like, and not be hurt again in camp. Like, can we
Yeah.
stop already? Like make it to week one without a groin or a foot or some sort of hamstring or groin. Like, I'm done with it. All right. But that's just me because I'm really sour this offseason.
Well, I think where your heart might be towards Kittle about being healthy, how he's used, like that was my frustration towards Debo in the playoffs. Now, injuries are injuries, guys get hurt. We've heard the past couple of months of Hargrave being injured and Armstead having a torn meniscus and other guys having like But Mooney and Kittle both had core surgeries. Like, these guys are banged up. We have no idea what's wrong. But it made me sick to my stomach, the fact that Debo was on and off the field the entire Super Bowl. And whether he was too hurt, I'm not going to call him out for that. That's not my business. But it made us feel helpless. Almost like our offense is so Debo centered at times that you have to have the greatest performance of all time by Jawan Jennings to overcome it.
Right.
Like, and I love Jawan. Happy he's back again for one more
almost
season.
happened.
It
almost
did.
happened.
And like, there's a variety of reasons as to why it didn't happen, and not the refs, Dante Whitner. but let's talk about receivers, because I think a lot of Niner fans would agree, and at least a heavy part of the conversation is, can you pay two receivers $25 million on average, going forward? I am someone who believes, I think Deebo Samuel's 29 next year, I believe. And you can get out of that contract. So there is a way out. All that to say, I don't think Kyle likes to cut players that he loves. Like, they rather work on a smaller contract, take a pay cut, rework your deal, than cut you, which, okay, like, Debo is still valuable at 29, no doubt. But I do think Niner fans are looking ahead, like you are, of like, where can we find the next Debo?
Yep.
I'm also someone of the mindset of, we don't even need a player like Debo to succeed. Like, if you have Brock Purdy that you believe is the guy, look around the NFL. There is nobody else like Deebo Samuel. That's a twofold conversation. He's great. He's awesome. Wow. Also, you don't need a player like him to win in the NFL.
Nope.
You love him. You love him. We all love Debo. We all love chanting Debo. Like, it's an awesome thing when he's on his game.
Yep.
Like, you got it. Like, but you don't need a player like that to win. In fact, they have not won with Debo Samuel. And in fact, he didn't play much in the biggest game this year. And I love Debo so much. Rocking the one this year, Deebo Samuel Sr. Going to be awesome. All that to say, I do think it would behoove the Niners to insulate themselves, because if you can't reach an extension with Jawan Jennings, he's gone in 1 year's time, most likely. If by some weird circumstance Brandon Ayuk plays on a fifth-year option, he's probably gone in 1 year's time. Like, then you're left with just Debo. So I think they re-sign Ayuk, but I would say it's smart to insulate yourself this year. And I know they talked to Javon Baker a lot from UCF. Dane Brugler has him as a fourth-round pick. I think he might be a third-round pick. But he's a burner. He's one of the best deep ball guys in this class. He can go up and get it. He can get above DBs. He can frustrate them and how he uses his body, uses his hands, has electric speed. He's 6'1", 208 pounds. He's someone that you just say, go up and get it. I'm throwing it up. I trust you. Get the ball down, and he will. Now, if you value a second-round receiver, and let's say you want to keep that physicality that Deebo Samuel brings to your offense, which I think Kyle would like to do. He hopes it's still Debo, but let's say it's not in 1 year time. I think the player that you look at is Malachi Corley from Western Kentucky. Now, he is one of the most coveted players, I think, in this year's draft. He's a second or third round pick. I think if you are the Niners and you value him a lot and you want to have Deebo Samuel Jr. on your roster and he doesn't play much unless Deebo gets hurt or he learns how to use or be used in the offense like Deebo for a year, Corley's a great leader. You listen to how his teammates talk about him. He's smart. He's intelligent. They just gush about who he is in that locker room in college. That's a guy you like to have in the NFL. He has strong hands, knows how to separate. Isn't the fastest guy, but he's 5'11", 215 pounds. He's a running back playing receiver. Ding, ding, ding. Who does that sound like? It's Deebo freaking Samuel. He is someone that you like to manufacture touches for. Had the second most yak in the entire college football season last year. In fact, 70% of his yards last year were yak. Incredible as to what he's done the past few years. Had 8.5 yards of yak per reception. They love their yak monsters, their yak bros, their yak kings. You'd be getting the Yak King Jr., the Yak Prince, if you will, if you want to draft Malachi Corley. But there is one more player I do think the Niners might have their eye on, and that's Xavier Legette from South Carolina. Ironically, the exact same place where Debo went to college. Probably a third-round pick, but he's 6'3", 227 pounds, a bigger body guy, someone that can go over the middle, isn't going to get out physical, which screams Kyle Shanahan to me. Super explosive, really good hands, 45% contested catch rate. That's extremely good for college. Good
Sounds like
body
a TO.
control.
Sounds like a TO
Like,
build.
I mean, honestly, yes. Like, I'm not saying he's TO, neither are you, but he's built like that. Isn't the best route runner, but I do think, like Kyle Shanahan likes to do, he only plays 3 receivers usually all year unless someone gets hurt. If he's your 4th guy and he can be, and this is a great thing, he's a good run blocker, but he's also been utilized on special teams. They got that new kick return rule, or rule, and we don't have a return man. So if you can kind of mark out a role for yourself like Legette can, it'll make Kyle Shanahan say, I have to play you. And he's kind of a burner. So like he fits a lot of roles San Francisco likes. And then again, if 1-2 years time, Debo's older, another year being injured, can't resign Ayuk, Jennings is gone. You're screaming, give me Legette, give me Corley, give me Baker. Of those 3, I'm pointing towards and leaning towards Xavier Legette from South Carolina.
I know Kyle doesn't like to play rookies. So a special teams opportunity for a guy like that would probably be perfect because Kyle doesn't trust. Kyle always goes with the players that he trusts, even if the player behind the players that he trusts have the potential to be better. That's just how that's how he runs the team.
Right.
And I understand that, it's one of those things where you got to come in and you'd have to be the second coming of Randy Moss really to rip a starting job away from somebody.
Right. Or be a first-round pick like Ayuk and Debo a second-round pick.
Yeah.
Like you have to be a high-end guy.
Yeah, Debo didn't become, or Ayuk didn't become what he was right away either.
Right.
He's had to work into becoming what he is. His first year, he showed flashes. He was in Kyle Shanahan's, quote unquote dog house for a while, which is a really bad place to be if you're a player. Because Kyle's Danny Gray. Yeah. I felt like what's his name? The other receiver got himself into that doghouse later in the year.
Ronnie Bell.
Yeah. Looks so promising in the preseason, and then what happened, man?
It's
like
fumbling, man. If you fumble, you're not playing.
Yeah, if you're fumble, you should get. In the old days, someone like that, you play for like a Bill Parcells type team. You fumble, you get cut. You know what I mean?
Well, so like it always brings me back to 2019. Matt Breida fumbles against the Falcons. He doesn't play the rest of the year. Shanahan said, Mostert, Coleman, you're my guys, and didn't play Breida, who at that point was your RB1, RB2. Didn't play him the rest of the year.
Leon Sandcastle says, I wouldn't mind wide receiver Poke in round 2. Really talented and literally sleeps in the weight room to be there first thing in the morning. I love those kind of players. Yeah, I'm always big on players that their off-season workouts and just their workouts in general is important because your body is your moneymaker. And if you don't take care of your body in the NFL, you're beat. Any other players of interest? I think that's 3. So I don't know. I'm not gonna limit you.
Mims. That's around 3 or 4. I've mentioned more. I want to take us to edge rusher for a second because they're gonna take one. Might take 5 for all we know. There are a handful of undersized edge rushers in this draft that I do think Chris Kocurek could have a field day with. One of them is making his rounds right now as kind of the sleeper. That's Mo Kamara from Colorado State. He's tiny. He's 6'1", 248. Again, doesn't have the great body, doesn't have great length. But when you talk about elite level effort, like when I think of effort, I think of Justin Smith chasing down a Philadelphia Eagles running back and forcing a fumble late in the season, like during the Harbaugh era. Like that's effort. Mo Kamara doesn't have that level of effort, but he just never gives up on a play. Explodes off the ball. His upper and lower half work in tandem, which isn't what you see very often of young players. Now, he is a 5th-year player out of Colorado State. Got the COVID season to benefit himself, but in 5 years in college, 45 tackles for losses, 30 and a half sacks, and 5 forced fumbles. Like,
So
you
that's
talk about
amazing.
production monster
Yeah.
in college. Like, I think if you give Kosaric him for a year or two, like, he will find some way to get him in there in rotation. And for a defense that has Yetur Gross-Matos now and has a player like Leonard Floyd, but behind them has an unknown in Drake Jackson. Robert Beal has potential still, but late round pick. I have no idea what he might be. You give me this born with leverage because he's 6'1" kind of player that it says go out there and get the quarterback and make a play. Like, Mo Kamara isn't the biggest guy, ain't the strongest guy, but he will give you everything he has every single play. And while there'll certainly be drawbacks to that, again, you give a 6'7" tackle, you're not going to beat him, right? But I do think Mo Kamara is a 5th, 6th round pick would just lighten up my day if they drafted him. There's a player like Xavier Thomas from Clemson, edge rusher as well. Some lower leg injuries that might scare the team away. Now, this may be a Trent Baalke kind of guy because he loves ACLs.
He does.
Thomas wasn't an ACL, but had a lower leg injury. But he's 6'2", 244, has a Hassan Reddick style of build, which is still kind of short, but is definitely usable in the NFL. He's uber explosive, good burst, relentless. Again, size like Kamara. He's bigger than Kamara, but the size is still a question mark. But I do think he's a low floor, high ceiling kind of player, which if you're in the 5th and 6th round, 4th round, like, okay, like I can live with a high ceiling, low floor kind of guy. He is 25 years old though. So
Wow.
you have to ask yourself, how much more does he have to grow? Then I go back to, well, Clelin Ferrell was the 4th overall pick and sucked in Las Vegas and Oakland and was fine this last year. Arden Key sucked with the Raiders and was fine. So Kosaric finds a way to get the best out of players. And I think Thomas could be someone they say, okay, like, you're older, you have some injuries, but we get you in here. You ain't going to be the guy, but if you're a guy for us, that's a win.
Yeah, and I feel like Kosaric simplifies things for people. The Niners run a pretty simple defense. That's why when they struggle and can't stop the run and can't get after the passer, I get upset because it seems like a pretty just like rush the quarterback, tackle the running back on the way there, type of defense. It doesn't seem like it has a whole lot of, intricate scheming that's going on. And I think it helps certain guys who maybe have a one talent that they do really well, which is, yeah, you're not going to play them on base rundowns, but on a 3rd and 12, when you need to get the team off the field, yeah, send a guy whose only thing he does well is get to the quarterback, cause turnovers, get sacks on the opposite side of a guy like Nick Bosa, their quote unquote NASCAR package that they run, where they bring in essentially all guys that can rush the passer.
Right. Which
so
that's what they want to get back to this year, hence why they fired Steve Wilkes. They want to get back to a read and react kind of defense, especially at the line of scrimmage, where that was the struggle early in the season of we're running stunts and we're running plays, where the past couple of years it was go and get them, boys. And I do think that getting back to that would benefit a player like Thomas, like Kamara, even a player like Javon Solomon, who, if you thought Kamara was small, how about Javon Solomon, who is 6'2", 246? He is tiny. He's 2 inches shorter than I am. Former off-ball linebacker, but he has 34-inch arms. He's longer arms than Jordan Morgan has, who might be this team's guard or tackle coming into the season. Like, just crazy bend, super explosive. Think like a Uchenna Nwosu from Seattle or Josh Uche from the Patriots. Like, everyone wanted Uche for the Niners this past year. So did I in the offseason. This guy is a pure pass rusher, 19% pass rush win rate, 16 sacks in 14 games this year.
wow.
Again, like, kind of like Kamara, like just born with leverage. When you're 6 feet tall, you can get under anybody's pad level. Like, you're born with leverage. And look, if that doesn't work out, he was an off-ball linebacker make him a linebacker again. Like
Yep.
there is ways to work him in the rotation. Now, again, that's probably a long shot, but I would rather have a player like Solomon, a player like Kamara, a player like Thomas over a player like Austin Booker from Kansas, who everyone seems to like, who is extremely raw. You have no, like, he is the boom or bust prospect of the edge rusher group this year, where if you love him, you love him. If you don't like him, don't even dare take him. Like, he just is someone that, like Austin Booker from Kansas, can be a really good player. The odds of that are very, very slim. So I'd rather have Solomon, Kamara, and if you want some size, go get Xavier Thomas. Like, he's 6'2", 244. Like, that's a bigger player than Kamara or Solomon would be. And he fits the mold of what Hassan Reddick might be for the Eagles or someone else this year.
Hassan Reddick's a good player.
Yeah, really good.
He's a really good player. So, I mean, if that's the body type and the way you want to mold your game after, that's not a bad player to take something from. But what else do you have? Are you, I'm just, I don't want to, I'm trying to figure out how to transition.
No, you're good. I mean, I could mention some other names like Brandon Dorless from Oregon is someone that I think, San Francisco likes, the guys that can play inside and outside. He is that. He's 6'3", 283. Again, he is someone that I think will have to pick a position, but under Koceric, he don't care. Like, he'll move you around. He'll mix and match. Look at Ameni. He will look at Gross Matos this year. Like, you will be able to play inside and outside. You talk about just one of the most deadliest club arms in college. It's Brandon Dorless. He will smack the you-know-what out of your helmet and get by it. He'll knock you on your heels and say, whoa. That's the kind of player he is. Most offensive tackles aren't used to a player that strong, and he'll get at you. He doesn't have the best pad level to play edge, in my opinion, but I think you mix him in with Hargrave and Collins, and if he has to play outside, you can mix him in with Floyd and opposite Bosa and whatnot. Like, he won't be flashy, but he'll smack some dudes around, and he gonna punch a hole in someone's chest one day. Like, he's just that kind of player. And I think that it might scare people away because you don't know what he might be in the NFL. Is he outside? Is he inside? But under Koceric, that flexibility is kind of desired. And I think a player like Brandon Dorless makes a lot of sense. Like, especially if San Francisco can't get the defensive tackle they might want. Because don't forget, Malik Collins, non-guaranteed contract next year.
Yep.
Then it's Kevin Gibbons as a free agent. And you have Jordan Elliott, I think, is on a 2-year contract, but there's ways they can get out of that. Like, they don't have the next guy next to Hargrave where you can like a Tavondre Sweat who has a lot of off-the-field issues, might stay away from him. Like, there's players like Michael Hall from Ohio State who I like a lot. But if you can't get one of those guys, I think Brandon Dorless makes a lot of sense for Morgan as well.
So at pick 31, if the Niners stay there, the 49ers select.
Well, it depends on who's there, right? But if Amarius Mims is gone, you have to pivot. And I think the biggest positional need, the two players they're going to look at, I think, if they're on the board, right? I think it'll be right tackle, right guard, or it'll be an edge rusher. I think the two players they like the most are Jordan Morgan and Marshawn Kneeland. I would like to think they'd go Marshawn or go Jordan Morgan, but if they value Blake Fisher, second round offensive tackle, I can see them going edge rusher and saying, we are the Niners, this is what we do. So I would not be surprised if pick 31, when it goes up there and it says, with pick 31, 2024 NFL draft, the Niners select Marshawn Kneeland, edge rusher out of Western Michigan. We're all like, again?
I wouldn't be surprised though.
No,
nobody would. To some people, I said, listen, we could hoot and holler for offensive line all we want, but the Niners are the Niners, and I feel like they're going to go based on the players, based on what's on their board and what fits them.
Yeah.
You're not going to draft a tackle just because he's a good, he's a tackle if he's not within a certain, your big board. So I want them to draft offensive tackle, and it's so boring. But edge rusher, I feel like edge rusher to me is what they're going to end up doing, just based on track record. We could pivot off the draft a little bit, start, talking the current team
Yeah, I mean,
if you want.
unless you want to get into cornerbacks.
Well, we can go into cornerbacks. Sure, let's go.
Because I think where the Niners are at pick 31, you're not going to get, Quinyon Mitchell. You're not going to get, Arnold from Alabama. You're just not going to get Cooper DeJean from Iowa. You're not going to get one of those top guys. I think the question for the Niners is, do you want an outside guy or do you want a nickelback? And as much as we all love nickelback, sometimes you have to decide, is Lenore going to play inside or play outside? I think Lenore's value is playing on the inside, which is why I would wait to take a cornerback in the mid rounds. I know there's hype around players like Andrew Phillips and Mike Seymour Steele from Michigan. I get that. I like Andrew Phillips a lot. He can't tackle. Great in coverage. He can't tackle. If you want a nickelback in a division that has Lockett, JSN, Cooper Kupp, I'm sure the Cardinals will find somebody else. If they're going to have like Puka, you got to tackle.
Yep.
And he doesn't tackle. Great in coverage. There's a value of, well, I don't have to tackle if they don't get the ball. That's right. That's true. But they're going to get the ball eventually. And he can't tackle. Mike Sanders still is 5'9", 182. Smaller guy, but he loves to light somebody up. He'll not as good in coverage as Phillips is, but he'll light somebody up. He invites violence. And I think that would intrigue the Niners. But I do think there is a player that 4th round, Oregon again, 6'3", 200 pounds, almost 33-inch arms, know how to use his body. He has 4.5 speed. He has makeup speed. Like a guy that likes to get nasty at the line of scrimmage, good tackler against the run, loves to tackle. In my opinion, top 3, maybe the best catch point defenders in this draft class. And he's a press corner, and that is Kyrie Jackson from Oregon. Again, it depends on what you value, but what does that sound like? What player does that sound like to you?
Javarius Ward.
Or if you want to get nuts, Richard Sherman. I'm not going that far with it.
Yeah, Sherman was a little slow.
But the build is there. He's 6'3".
Rangy, tall, skinny corner. Right. The thing with Sherman had the mental part of the game.
Yeah,
you know
Sherman
what I mean?
Sherman had the physical tools to be rangy, to be kind of that naggy. He can get an arm on you wherever you're at, but he was so smart. He can read the play. Jackson ain't that player, and I'm not saying he's Sherman. What I'm saying is that if you want that mid-round corner to play outside, and Mooney Ward's a free agent after this year, and you just want to get him in the building, maybe he's not starting over Ambry, but I guarantee you in a couple practices, you're going to like him a lot more than Ambry. You get Kyrie Jackson, you're not going to have a problem of who's going to guard DK. You're not going to have a problem of how do we stop Puka or Marvin Harrison Jr. You're going to have a bigger body guy that can hang with them, at least physically. Now, there's more deficiencies in his game that we'll find out, when time comes, but he just knows how to invade space. And in a defense that is zone, gotta invade space. And when you have a player like that who has long arms, can go up and attack the ball in the air, when I think of the Niners and the deep ball, Hufunga's hurt, you have a slower safety in Jair Brown, who plays fast, mind you, but you are in a position where if you don't find a safety, you could get beat over the top a lot. And that's horrifying. Kyrie Jackson's not going to get beat over the top a lot. And that's really inviting to me.
Yeah, Niners have a lot of questions at safety, this coming into this season with the T-Gip and Funga. And Funga's not a fast guy to begin with, like you said, and Jair Brown is, I think him and Jair are very similar in their skill set as far as they're just not the fastest guy in recovery speed.
Yeah.
But they have the physicality and they play well within the box, so to speak. I think they're both good box safeties as far as how physical they play the run. And even getting after the passer to that matter. Yeah, I would not mind. See, you're right. The Niners need to figure out what they want to do with this cornerback position. What is Diamador Lenore? Is he an outside guy? Are we pushing him inside? I know they went after a guy in free agency who they want to push out maybe to outside corner. I forget his name.
Isaac Yadam from the
Isaac
Saints.
Yadam. A lot of people are saying, well, maybe Yadam goes to outside and we push Diamador and Lenore inside. I don't know enough about Yadam to say that he would be a good outside corner. I don't. I'd rather have Demo on the outside and figure what we're going to do in the slot. But yeah, the Niners, their defense as a whole needs to improve from last year. They were not the team that we were used to seeing and not the unit we were used to seeing. So cornerback does intrigue me because you're right. You can't pay everybody. Javarius Ward eventually can get moved on from, and if you draft a guy that has similar body size and skill set, what the hell? And he doesn't have to start right away, which is a great thing. Go ahead.
No, I'm saying like that to me, weirdly enough, the Niners have a lot of questions, but don't have a lot of holes.
Right.
Like, there's a lot of things you can wonder, well, this guy goes down, who do you have? Like, what's the future look like there? And maybe they're a team that just like, who cares about the future? We're just going to go for it one more time and just see if it works out, which, okay, that's cool. Like, I'm fine loading back up. It's super hard to do it. Teams have done it. But I think like the Niners seem to understand that in a year where I wouldn't say you're retooling, but in a way you're kind of retooling your roster. You let Armstead go. You have a bunch of non-guaranteed contracts. You have a lot of void years in the guys you signed, where you can cut him in 1 year's time if you don't like him. Ayuk could be gone. Jennings could be gone. Like, your roster could look massively different in a year.
Yeah.
Hence why I think you want to make 10, 9, 8 picks this year and get the guys you really fall in love with. Because if you can do that, a window that is still open, but is closing, I think we can all admit that. Like, windows don't last long unless you have the guy. And if Brock's the guy, then whatever, it's wide open. But really good quarterbacks go 10 years without winning one. Brady went 10 years. And he's one of the greatest quarterbacks, if not the greatest quarterback ever. He went almost a decade and didn't win. If it's true and Brock is the guy, windows open, great. But you still have to put the players around him to be successful. Even Mahomes, for as I guess you can say, his lack of star power the offense had this year, had a top 5 offensive line, had Travis Kelce, had Isaiah Pacheco. He had weapons. Now, receivers, different question. Rashid Rice developed, and it took a lot of luck to get where they were. A lot of teams got in their own way for the Chiefs to get where they were, and they capitalized, and good for them. I hate them, but good for them. But I think the Niners are in a position where they're kind of in between of you can go for the whole thing again, which they will. But you have to ride the fine line, ride the lightning if you're a Metallica fan of, what are we going to do this year? As the shirt, I didn't even notice that. It's great. What is the path you want to take this year? Is it riding a fence and is it picking 2 lanes? You can get in a lot of trouble picking developmental players early. Hence Cam Latu. What is that pick right now? And it's put you in a position where I don't know what the draft was at 3rd, 4th round last year. Just tend to forget it. But that pick is everyone scratched their head. The last thing you want to do. And last year they had 2 of them back to back, Moody and Latu, which there's more trust in Moody now than there was earlier in the year, but still a question mark at kicker.
Weirdly enough, he's still a huge question mark.
And rightfully so. For as good as he was in moments, there was also a lot of bad. The last thing you want to do is go, wow, you left Ben Sinnott on the board in the 3rd and 4th round. You could have had him behind Kittle. You left Kyrie Jackson on the board. You left a starting caliber player to draft, backup center who's never going to play. Nick Zakel 2.0. You don't want to do that.
Stop drafting as if you already, like if you've already won.
Right.
You know, you have to draft. The problem I've seen with the Niners in the last couple drafts is they tend to draft like a team that's already made it. Like they waste picks on projects, and it's
Right.
like you can't do that this year. If you want to quote unquote keep the window open. I mean, you look in Buffalo, that window might have shut.
Yeah.
Okay, like completely. They have Josh Allen, but they don't have a whole lot of other talent around him right now that we can
Right.
name. Bills fans might be able to, but you can't have another draft where you say, "Hey, let's take a flyer on a tight end." No, like all these picks have to count this year, or most of them. Like you said, hit on 2 or 3. If you hit on an offensive tackle, a corner, and maybe a wide receiver or a tight end, mainly tight end, I would say tight end, offensive tackle, and corner. You hit on those 3 positions. All of a sudden, you could say, okay, see you, Javarius Ward. All right, kiddo, we're going to move on from you. We're going to cheapen up certain positions so that we could pay other positions. That's how windows elongate. If you keep missing and you go into a draft like they do this year and have one of those, oh, gee, golly, let's just take a flyer on a guy. No, you can't do that. Like, don't let a Kyle draft the running back in the 3rd round. Stay away from the running backs, please.
Which is what I was going to bring up, because there was that tweet that then got deleted really fast. Now the source isn't the most reliable one, but Tony Pauline, who again is not the most reliable source in the NFL world, tweeted out that the Niners have a day 2 grade on Isaac Guerendo from Louisville. And I love Isaac Guerendo from Louisville. He's a running back though.
Oh, God.
And like, I'm all for getting an RB2 behind McCaffrey. I'm good with that. Mitchell can't stay healthy. When he is healthy, he's fine. I don't dislike Elijah Mitchell. I don't, and I like Jordan Mason. I think he should get some more run. But I am someone that has looked at the last 2 years and say, wow, McCaffrey's been healthy. There's been injury history there, and I don't think it's as egregious as the reports might say, or the track record might say it is. But how often do running backs hold up into their late 20s and 30s? They just don't.
They don't.
And so, like, I'm all for getting an RB2. And I get money wouldn't permit that in the offseason. I'm not saying go pay for Derrick Henry, although that'd be really fun. Like, I don't want to draft Isaac Guerendo in the 2nd or 3rd round, knowing that you have a higher positional value of needs. You have a roster that I don't want to say is teetering, but again, is finding themselves like, we're really good still. You can win the NFC. You can go to the Super Bowl again this year. But do you have the depth? Do you have, if you want to get into like a body weight conversation, do you have the density that you're just a thick, strong, in non-sexual way? You have a girthy roster that can go the entire way.
It's all about the girth, baby.
Right. And like, I think that they have the star power that you say best roster in football, bar none. But they have these pivotal positions: kicker, safety, right tackle, right guard, where you're like, there's a massive hole there. Or at least a question could form where they don't answer it, which they easily can. But if they don't, that could be their downfall. And they have yet to draft or address right guard, despite losing 2019 because your right guard, Mike Person, fell apart, then retired at the end of that year. And this past year, where you thought Burford was your starter, you sign Feliciano. Feliciano becomes your starter. He gets hurt. Then Burford comes in and doesn't know his assignment. Like, you want to avoid those catastrophic mistakes, and great teams that win do. Now, no one's saying draft 11 right guards, but you have to find the players that you love. One concern I have, and we've already hit on it, is that San Francisco, Kyle Shanahan more so, falls in love with players like Cam Latu, like Nick Zakelj, like Joe Williams, who he had to have, like CJ Beathard, who, although he led us to Brock Purdy from a comp pick standpoint, you just don't. They've done so well to construct this roster. But despite that, and which is really hard to say despite that because they're so good every year, despite that, there are still key pivotal places where it just comes back to haunt us every single year. And if you're a Niner fan, which you both are, love this team and want to win so much, I have a hard time believing that we're not going to get into round number 1, edge rusher. Round number 2, it's going to be, I don't know, it could be a right tackle. It could also be a running back who doesn't, or receiver who doesn't play for the whole year. Then round 3, running back. And we're like, oh my God, like we have improved nowhere. And it's like we have edge rushers, we have running backs, we have receivers who I have no problem drafting those positions. But it's like I'd rather have a player like Dejon Edwards in the 6th round from Georgia as a running back who can come in and be a thumper and be a guy in a year or two behind a Mitchell, behind a Mason, behind a McCaffrey, than draft one in the round 3 and say, well, we hope he plays. No, like you have to hit. You can miss on picks, from the round 4 and beyond.
Everybody misses though. That's the thing.
Right. But if you hit in rounds 1 through 3, those misses look so much better. You have to hit in the first 3 rounds. You just do. And even like San Francisco has done so great at hitting, 4th, 5th, 3rd, 6th round, but they've had so many misses in those first 3 rounds.
They have.
How many receivers? Danny Gray, Dante Pettis, Trey Sermon, Ty Davis Price, like those things eventually add up.
They do.
Like Trey Lance. Like I like Trey. Hope he's successful. Go quarterback the Cowboys and be great. Don't win, but be great, right? But like those draft picks you used to go up and get him could have had a right tackle last year. Could have had a right guard last year. And again, if Trey Lance works out, we're having a whole different conversation, right? But it's the misses and where they've missed and when they've missed that kill you. Yeah. And like this year, it's so pivotal that they don't have to be perfect.
No.
But they have to fill the holes. Or
they've got to hit on some foundational picks or players as far as legacy positions, tight end. They can't go, like we've said, like they can't go into this draft and like, throw spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. Like, no, you have to improve this team and have a look to the future, because I really believe this is the last year of said group, of this particular group of players. They had their chance against the Chiefs. And I said it to my brother. I said, if they lose the Super Bowl, it's there's no guarantee. A lot of 49er fans automatically think, oh, we're going to get back. It's no problem. Don't worry about it. Why are you so upset, Aaron? I'm like, I've been a football fan over 30 years. I know that, sometimes it takes decades before a team returns to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And you have to capitalize. And so, I mean, they still have a good enough team to get back to the conference championship.
Yeah.
But they like you said, they got to hit on some players and they got to make good on some picks and not go into a draft where they draft a guy who may not touch the field this year. You can't afford that going into 2024. I got to ask you, as far as we move off the draft, what is your take on the Ayuk contract situation? Are you of the mindset that Ayuk, like Debo, like Bosa, I'm not going to say he's going to have a Bosa situation where he misses training camp. Are you of the mindset that they're going to get it done sometime before early to late July? It kind of gives me that feeling that that's what's going on right now.
I have a hard time believing Ayuk is not going to get re-signed. Like, as soon as the draft passes, his leverage is gone.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how Debo worked. It was okay. Like, we'll talk to you after the draft, because they know they don't field calls. They don't pick up his calls for a little bit about wanting a trade. If he has said that, we have no idea. But as soon as the draft goes, on April 25th through 28th, they're gone. His leverage is gone. And I think that's the time. Let's sit down, have a conversation. Let's, work this thing out. I don't think it'll be like Bosa, because what Bosa was like the Thursday or the Wednesday prior to week 1, and it showed in the first half of the year. It really did.
Yeah, absolutely. He said it, which angered me to death. Like, oh yeah, it did affect me. I'm like, no, man. Like, of course it's going to.
Which the Bosa situation was it was weird. Like I was there like every single day. Like He showed up for the first mandatory day and said, "I'll get paid what I deserve," and bounced. Which okay, that's fine. Like, then didn't come back for the next 2 months, and it was like, oh, okay, like where's Nick at? We're waiting. Um, the difference between the Nick situation and the Ayuk situation is they didn't fine Nick Bosa, which they easily could have. I think they would fine Brandon Ayuk.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't find Debo, but Debo's contract got done a little sooner than Bosa's did. I'm of the mindset that they're not gonna treat Ayuk like Nick Bosa. We'll waive your fines. Come when you want. No, 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 no. Ayuk knows he's not Bosa. Bosa knows that he ain't like Ayuk. Like there's a fine line of defensive player of the year, elite player, which Bosa is and still is to this day, despite having a quote unquote off year on his standards, although it was still good. Ayuk is not Nick Bosa. Like they will find him, at least I think. Um, which may anger him, but okay, like we will give it back to you in your contract, but we're gonna fine you now. Like that's how it's gonna be. I think it gets done though. Like I don't. It's hard to find quarterbacks and receivers that have synergy and
Mm-hmm.
chemistry. Like we all thought Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. Oh man, great quarterback and receiver tandem. And now you see Diggs on Twitter liking tweets anti Josh Allen, anti Buffalo, and who knows what went down. Beef on sidelines were relevant during the year and evident during the year. I think the chemistry that Brandon Ayuk and Brock Purdy have, and John Lynch has said as much, that's something you don't let walk out the door. And I think Ayuk may get 60 mil guaranteed, fine, but it's the structure of that contract that's not going to hurt them.
Yeah, they're going to protect themselves with the contract. They always protect. The Niners always protect themselves with contracts.
Right.
Very few players on this team that they sign does the team have a disadvantage? Say what you want about the Niners and them being, crafty bookkeepers and I that's something I've attacked the Niners for in the past about being, like we're really good bookkeepers with our money and like, playing around with, contracts and stuff. But at the end of the day, the Niners seem to have their money uh, allocated properly so that they always have a chance to have a competitive roster.
Right.
Not blowing their wad on one guy. I mean, look at them. How long have they been playing? How long have they been paying D Ford? They screwed up big time on that contract, and now I think they're finally free this year.
This was the first year where they were free of it after 19? Yeah.
Yeah. So
and he hasn't played in 2-3 seasons.
That's so bad. I think the minute that money clears for Armstead in was it June?
June 2nd.
I really think that Ayuk deal is going to start to ramp up and he gets signed. I really believe that before training camp he'll be there. I don't think he's in mini camp. I really don't, which is a detriment to him and Purdy. But I don't know. The Niners do things a certain way, and I don't see them changing. And then they have their offer. They present that offer, and the player is usually like, "Yeah, I'm not satisfied. Talk to my agent." It's every year. It's the same. Every single player, it's the same. I'm sure with Brock Purdy, if Brock has another good year, Brock's not going to just take any old thing that the Niners are going to roll out to him. There's a bit of gamesmanship with teams and agents and stuff. The Niners don't want to overpay, and the agent wants to make sure that the player gets more, because if the player gets more, the agent gets more. It's everybody wins, right? If it goes right. So yeah, I'm cool with the offseason, like after the draft, kind of calming down a little bit. Not much for content, but it's like I said, and I told you before stream and even on stream, like this has been one of the harder off seasons to kind of get re-engaged.
Yeah.
After the Super Bowl, I like talking draft. Draft is kind of my thing. My jive. I don't know how much I'm going to be into it this year, but I do kind of like getting a cup of coffee on the last day of the draft. I like Saturday,
like round 6 and 7 to sit there.
Yeah, like all the remaining rounds and just being
great.
Like, I love it. It's so weird and it's so boring to some people, but I find it to be just like, oh, who's this? Like Jawan Jennings, for crying out loud. He was what, a 7th rounder, 6th rounder?
7th rounder from Tennessee. Yeah.
And he's he's their big 3rd down option that gets the ball all the times. Let's see here. I'm going to ask you something that's not football related in a second, but I want to get your opinion on the
Okay.
QB room.
Okay.
The QB room this year, I know certain people like Grant Cohn, they make their money on kind
Right.
of certain types of narratives and division and all that kind of stuff. But I really think this is the best 49er room quarterback wise in a while. I think, having Purdy and then signing, oh my God, Josh Dobbs. Josh Dobbs, if you sign him for what he is, it's a great pick.
Right.
You're not signing him in to come in here and be, the quarterback of the future. I think this guy was on multiple teams last year. He played relatively well. Yeah, maybe it ended differently than it started, but I'm actually more encouraged than with Darnold last year because I watched Darnold in the preseason. I thought he was dog water. A lot of people are like, oh, he had some good throws. I'm like, geez, really? Is that what we're doing? We're breaking down like 4 throws and saying a guy had a successful, outing or whatever. What's your take on the Niners QB room?
Well, we didn't know what Brock Purdy was in 2022. So
Right.
I think this is their best room since then, which it's only 2 years ago, but we didn't know what the room was going to be. Right. So you go into the year with Lance and Garoppolo and Purdy. At the time, you had Nate Sudfeld. Um, Obviously, there's a different dynamic to this room. There's a clear cut QB1, then a
Yep.
clear cut QB2, and a clear cut QB3.
Mhm.
I was of the mindset that QB2 was going to be Brandon Allen, which I was okay with. But when they signed Josh Dobbs, which I think caught a lot of people by surprise,
Me,
I was like,
I,
this is great.
yeah.
If Josh Dobbs has to play, he can win 2 games, 3 games, and then Purdy's back. And the same thing went for Darnold last year too. If Purdy had to play, Darnold played good enough to beat the Rams last year. Jake Moody couldn't kick a field goal though, or couldn't make a PAT. And there was backups in, but still, I I hope those guys never play. I hope it's just Purdy, obviously, but I think after going through the Jimmy G era, for as good as it was at its heights, every play, whether it was a throw, mainly if he gets hit, is he going to get back up? And I don't have that fear of Purdy, but now even if Purdy doesn't get back up, because he took a couple stingers last year, and there was some
Yes, he
blips of
did.
is he healthy? Um, I think that Josh Dobbs can come in, learn the system, and he's a freaking astronaut, right? He's a rocket scientist. He can learn Kyle Shanahan's system, as the comment says. He's super smart. Um, and Brandon Allen's already been here for a year. There's carryover, there's high IQ, and there's Brock Purdy. There's winnable football at almost every single spot in the depth chart. Different degrees, obviously. Purdy can take it to the Super Bowl. Josh Dobbs can squeak you into the playoffs, and Brandon Allen can keep you alive for a few games. I think that's where you want to be, and I would like to think overall, not just the starter, but overall, it's probably the best quarterback room in the entire league currently.
Yep.
I can't think of a better
Yep.
room right now.
No, this is your third stringer. You never want to see him play. But
Right.
from 1 to 2 in a game where, hey, if the Niners need to win a game, I have a lot of confidence in Dobbs to come out there with the weapons we have. Essentially, he just has to facilitate. He can move a little bit. He's a little
Right.
bigger than Purdy. Like you said, he's smart too. I think the Niners have 2 really smart quarterbacks in their first and their second guy, as far as guys who are football smart. You can have that was the big thing with Trey Lance. Everybody loved all his physical stuff, but the football IQ part was the part that he just never was able to take that step where he could read a defense, make quick decisions, hit his back foot, throw the ball. You can throw the ball through a wall or over a stadium, but if you don't know who you're going to when the pressure's on, what's the point of having all those ridiculous traits? So,
Right.
you're right. I think they have the best quarterback right now in April 10th, 2024, as we're speaking, 2 weeks
Right.
before the draft. I think they have the best QB room as well. So I completely concur. One more football question, and then I'm going to ask you a non-football question, and then we'll go. Do you think that this 49ers defensive line is better coming into this season than it was coming into last season as far as a whole? I feel like, with the two guys that they brought in, plus they brought in two edge guys, and uh, I feel like those players, the one thing that those players have over the previous people that were here is the ability to stay healthy. And I feel like whatever sometimes you lose maybe in skill, you might make up for in the fact that guys are always on the field. What's your thoughts on the D line? I think they improved, honestly. I know some people disagree with, Eric Armstead, but I feel like Malik Collins is going to be a starter. And Floyd is going to be a starter opposite of Nick Bosa. What's your real quick thoughts on the D line?
From coming into last year, when it was Nick Bosa, who was never in the building because of the contract negotiation. Then it was Drake Jackson and Clone for your 1 and 2 because Bosa wasn't there the entire offseason program. Far, like just from the jump, better. And I can argue, and I can't find the tweet I put out a while ago, but like they added like 85 sacks to their room. Now, sacks aren't everything, and we know this, but like you're adding a lot more production that has been seen over years with some upside. And if you get production from Drake Jackson, who was second round pick a handful of years ago, who's been a bust so far, like that's great. Like found money. Like I think at this moment, from where the Niners ended last year with Gregory and Chase Young and injured Drake Jackson and Nick Bosa, then the interior guys, like I could honestly say that if they aren't better, they're better than how they began last year, but even how they ended the season. Like there's a real conversation to be had that at least on paper, they're better than they were. And I know the name value isn't there. Like Joe Chase Young and Gregory, like Gregory sucked. Gregory sucked besides one game, and that was the biggest game of the year, and he played fine. Like Chase Young was non-existent 75% of his games here. And I like Chase Young. There was just a disconnect. Like he just there's a reason why he has a 1-year deal. Like there's a reason why, because he has to prove
he's an effort. He's an effort guy. He has issues with effort. That was one of the reasons why that, Washington was moving off him. That was kind of the big sticking point why the, Commanders were kind of looking to move on from him. And it showed its head. I mean, that playoff game, he's jogging, guys are running into the end zone. It's just like, really? Biggest game of the year, and that's the kind of effort that you're going to put on the field and put on tape. So, yeah, you're right. Name value is just that. It's just name value. It doesn't actually. Yeah, I'd rather have guys that run under the radar all day that are hardworking guys that it shows up, maybe not on the field as far as like you say name value, but it shows up in effort. So
yeah, and like I get that Niner fans will go Leonard Floyd, Yetur Gross-Matos, Malik Collins, but like these guys are veteran players that know how to play, that have done it in Collins and Floyd's instance, have done it for, I don't know, half a decade plus. Like they are 30 years old. They're refined in their work. Like they're not getting like 22-year-old unproven guys. They're not finding Arden Keys and Clellan Farrells and hoping they work out. And those guys worked out here. Like I'm not knocking what they did, but like they now aren't relying on Drake Jackson to be, defensive end number 2. He might get cut. Like I think as where they are now, they're at least more proven coming into the year.
And health.
Yes.
These guys, I mean, Floyd hasn't missed a game since 2018.
It's been like 6 years. It's been incredible what he's done.
What is the Niners' biggest issue all the time?
It's
guys
missing
Nick
games. Bosa health. Yeah.
So sometimes I think you're right. I think right now, if you started week 1, I think to start the season, I just think they would be a better team because they have just guys that can stay healthy, and 2, I think you don't blow all your stack of money on one player when you can essentially bring in 4 guys for the price of 1, which is always a lot of fans always want that anyways. Like, oh, he doesn't want to be here making $24 million a year. Okay, well then we'll take that money and we'll build a bunch of depth and have, instead of 1 guy, we'll have like 4, and that's essentially what they did. So I'm cool with it. Plus, games don't start till September, so whatever we say now, we could always go back and change.
Well, that was the Joey Bosa conversation of like, do you want to get Joey? And look, there's a lot to like about Joey and a lot to dislike about Joey. The Niners tried to get Joey Bosa, like not sign him. According to Mike Silver, think what you want of the guy, but he said they tried to trade for him. So it's not like they weren't dipping their toe into the big fish pond. They always
Mhm.
will. They always will, which may come to fruition at safety with Justin Simmons, maybe. I don't know, but like they're always going to be in the conversation of almost had him, or yeah, we made a couple calls, didn't work out, fine. Like they just knew we have to get younger, and if we can't get younger, we have to get more durable. And they did those things. Like if losing a Super Bowl, for as bad as it was, if I gave any team this offseason, it's probably a B, which is where you want to be. Like that's a good offseason for a team coming off a phenomenal season that ended in the final game of the year.
Yep. As far as safety, I think that a lot of people, we got what we expected as far as uh uh his name, the Colts. I'm trying to think of I've been talking about him all
Julian
offseason.
Blackmon.
Yeah, we all wanted him. The chances of him signing here were going to be slim to none just because
Right.
the Niners don't really know what they have right now at safety. And you're not going to hold a guy up. You know, I remember me and Raj was like, don't worry about it, Aaron. They'll wait a little bit and then they'll go on and get him. And then he ends up re-signing. And so, and they, you know, as far as Raj goes, they're still not quite sure what they are doing at safety. So, yeah, you're not going to get a guy like Julian Blackmon. Simmons could be more of a realistic option.
I
Real
think
quick.
go ahead. You're good.
Go, no, you let me. I'll let you finish.
I was to say like Quandre Diggs is still out there from Seattle, knows the system pretty well. He could be an option, instant starter. But if you want to get younger and you want to get a little nuts, Ashton Davis from the Jets last year, he wanted to start. They couldn't promise him a job. They replaced him. Played much better to end the year than beginning. He started with the Jets a little bit last year in relief of injuries. Had 6 takeaways, so like he has the ability to get the ball back for you.
Wow.
And he went to Cal. So like I'm not saying that's the best connection in the world, but on the Jets, played in the system, solid connection, back home, could be a starter if Hufanga isn't healthy. Like a lot of that makes sense. You wouldn't have to pay him a lot of money. And I think for what it's worth, like at least getting him in the room could be a good option for them.
Nice. And then I want to get your real quick thought on how you felt.
I think it is. I hope it's
how do you feel about WrestleMania?
Yes, I was waiting for that question. Let's go. Oh man, oh man.
Now, I don't follow wrestling like you do, or like Raj, because Raj is a huge wrestling fan.
Oh, man,
I am a big CM Punk guy.
Okay,
I'm a big CM Punk guy.
So you love the McIntyre Rollins match then?
Oh, I'm looking forward to all that. My
what
thing
about tonight?
is
AEW and the released backstage footage.
I haven't. Oh, I got to see that. A lot of people say it's only going to be from Jack Perry's perspective. I don't know, but it was nice to see Cody Rhodes do,
awesome.
get the win and The Rock. You say what you want about him and how he, steals the spotlight from younger guys. That guy's box office.
Yeah,
he's money. I don't like when the older guys come in and steal time from other guys, but I mean, wrestling right now is definitely becoming a little bit more mainstream again.
Yeah,
we always talk about the Attitude Era. I mean, I grew up through it. But this is as popular that as WWE/WWF has been probably in the last 20 years. What's your overall take?
So I didn't like night one at all. I was bored. I love Rhea Ripley, and I love watching Motionless in White do her song. Like I was all for it. I was up there singing it with her. I had a watch party. Friends that I know don't like wrestling are getting back into wrestling again.
I used to do watch parties all the time, brother. It was awesome.
We did them in college when wrestling was not very good, and we're doing them again, and it's awesome. Like we were getting hyped and laughing and having fun. But night one wasn't what I liked until the tag match at the end. The Rock was in great shape, and he always is, but like good wrestling shape. He was taking bumps and it's funny. So I was at work for night two, but I finagled my way into being able to watch it. Warriors were playing. Don't tell my boss, but I was watching WrestleMania night two. I unfortunately had despite my best efforts, had the final match spoiled for me. But kind of knew what was going to happen, but I didn't know how it was going to happen. I didn't have the surprises that occurred spoiled for me, which was great. But I loved night 2. Like, that to me is one of the best WrestleMania nights of all time. Obviously, X7's great. 18 is fun. The last 4 WrestleManias have been really good. It was so good that I came back to my house, got my brother, got my father, got my mother, who do not watch wrestling. And I said, we're watching WrestleMania night 2. You need to watch Cody Rhodes knock off Roman Reigns. And I'm not kidding. My father, who again does not like wrestling, audibly screamed when it was 1, 2, 3. It was yes. Like, it's that kind of story that captivates the audience. It was selfishly of myself when I was hosting Niner post games and pre games on 95.7 The Game. My whole mantra for the Niners this past year was finish the story. Like, you have this amazing thing that you can do, and you have to finish the story, which I stole from Cody Rhodes. But to watch him hoist the WWE Undisputed Universal Championship was awesome. And it was like, I was mad when he lost a year ago, but it was just an overwhelming joy to see, wow, like, they paid this thing off, and arguably one of the greatest storylines in wrestling history.
One of the longest builds of a story, and that's what old school wrestling was, is like really long builds.
Yeah.
You don't shotgun the same thing 3 months in a row. Remember when Punk talked about that when he left, and it was the same thing. But we could go on all day talking about this, but we're going to get out of here, everybody. I hope that Sterling makes you feel a lot smarter about being a 49er fan. I'm going to actually go back and rewatch this after we're done, so that I could get an idea of some guy, like the guys to watch for again, and write them all their names down and stuff. So thank you for that, Sterling. Everybody, thank you for coming through and being part of the show. We'll try to do this again, maybe as we get closer to training camp or something. Like I said, my streams are going to be kind of few and far between. I try to make it quality over quantity. Like I said, not a lot to talk about. Maybe we could do this post draft when you're not slaving at 95.7 The Game, working crazy hours. But yeah, everybody have a great rest of your night. Thank you so much for coming on, Sterling, and we'll talk to you guys later. Take care, everyone.